Hello everybody, welcome to the 58th episode of the On The Line Tennis Podcast. It's me, Jack, as always, and I am joined today by Vansh. How are you, Vansh? Good to see you.
Good to see you, Jack. Always love it when you invite me, and I'm honored to be here.
Awesome, yeah. You're doing me a favour as always, Vansh, so thank you very much. Today with Vansh, we are going to be covering Washington from last week. We're going to cover San Jose, and we are also going to cover Los Cabos. Have I missed anything there? I think that's all of them. We'll try and keep it fairly short because I know everybody's very keen to just dive into the Montreal action at this point, but we still will have quite a lot to talk about. We'll try and keep it fairly condensed. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the last week, so stay tuned. Enjoy! Vansh, are you happy to start with the ATP side of Washington?
Yep, sounds good.
Amazing. Okay. We had Kyrgios win that tournament. It was maybe a bit of a surprise that he won. You know, every time Kyrgios manages to maintain his focus for 5 or 6 matches, it's a pretty big surprise. At the same time, it's the second time this year, so maybe we shouldn't be so surprised. But before we do dive into that, I would just like to talk about a few of the first rounds, and in particular, Andy Murray will be my starting point. Did you catch that one, Vansh? Were you impressed with Andy's loss there?
I think it actually aged pretty well because Mikael Ymer went on a run and he won 4 matches in a row, and they all sort of followed the same pattern, right? Where he won the first set and then sort of, the opponent came back at him in the second, and then he managed to regain the momentum and win the third. So I thought that was very impressive from Ymer to do that 4 times in a row. On Andy's side of things, I was a little bit surprised how he was sort of grinded down, but I guess not too surprising given that it's his first match back. For a while, right? Since the grass season, and he was struggling a little bit in the heat and humidity, and it's quite brutal in Washington. So from that standpoint, I think he got some good information here as to where his level's at, and I think he can build on that before the U.S. Open. There's still quite a bit of time, I think.
Yeah. So you sound a lot like my friend Ewan, who is ever the Andy optimist, manages to spin any sort of Andy storyline in a positive way. I do agree with you, Vance, to be fair. I do think, first match back, there's not much you can read into it, really. One note, though, I did make in the first set, the way he lost that 4 drop shots, a drop shot on 3 of the set points that were saved. Andy would have been absolutely livid. I know he did throw his racket, he did look a little bit angry, but there's no way he was... he was probably angrier than he looked, even though he did look quite angry. He hates losing those sort of points. He was in every single one, big baseline rallies. He felt like he should have been the one winning every single one there. He gets drop shots to chase down. He gets to 2 of them. The first one catches him by surprise, but the other 2 he gets to, and he would have been absolutely livid to lose that. So it's one of those ones that kind of felt like it should have been Andy's. The sort of matches we were seeing last year where Andy had chances and just wasn't converting. So it was a little bit difficult to stomach.
No, totally, and it reminded me a lot actually of the Kepfer match in Paris where he had those 7 match points, and there was a little bit of indecision on his part on some of those big points, and I think that's where that's sort of where I see the main difference now between Andy now and sort of when he was in his prime. I guess it's that little bit of indecision on the big points because he wants it that little bit bad, and he's playing against someone who can sort of match him in sort of that department of athleticism and anticipation. And usually, you're right. He usually tends to win those rallies when he gets those drop shots, and usually he seems to always have an answer. And he's got great tennis IQ, as we know. So I'm sure he's got it. But in the larger scheme of things, I guess it's quite impressive still to me that he's back in the top 50. And I think I guess it's always a little bit of it's a double-edged sword with Andy these days, isn't it? So.
You're quite right, Vansh. There's not too much to be disappointed by. Kaia was a bit difficult to stomach, but you're quite right. He's still on the up. He's on the up. I think the fact that he's on the up, full stop, is an actual positive. So I agree with you wholeheartedly, definitely. Next one I'd like to talk about very quickly, Emil Ruusuvuori defeating Hubert Harcatch. This guy is on the rise. I feel like anybody who isn't clued into Ruusuvuori should be. He is hitting his forehand in particular amazingly well. He does hit it so cleanly, almost better than sort of 90% of the tour. I would go as far as to say he it depends on the surface, of course. He tends to hit it pretty flat, but I mean a fast hard court, it should be right up his street, to be quite honest. So he could be dangerous for anybody. He's playing Stan right now. I'm pretty sure. I think he's up a set against Stan. I'm not surprised at that. he beat Hubert Hurkacz. Definitely the kind of guy he could beat, because if you start trading forehands, you probably fancy Ruusuvuori to be the one that comes out on top. And there was a few of those rallies in the tiebreak, and that's why he won it, quite frankly, because it was a few important points that just went his way, blasting a few forehands cross court, and he came out on top. So yeah, have you've been watching this guy for quite a while, Vansh? Are you sort of aware of him, or are you kind of getting used to his game a little bit?
Yeah, no, I've been following him for quite a while. I think when I first heard of his name is when he beat Team in 2019 in a Davis Cup match, and he just beat him 3-2. And I thought, okay, that was I have to pay attention now. That's a serious scoreline. And sort of from there, I've been following him, and he kind of reminds me a little bit of Jannik Sinner in the way that he hits. In his ball striking, like you said, his forehand is such a big weapon. And against Harcatch, I actually felt pretty confident in him winning because I picked him in my predictions to beat Hubie. And I just felt like the gap between the discrepancy between the two forehands was going to be the main factor there. And just Rusevori's willingness to hit out on the big points, where I think Hurkacz got a little bit passive, a little bit too far behind comfortable, a little bit behind the baseline, and just wasn't doing enough with the forehand. And that's kind of Hubie's, he kind of lives and dies by that shot, if you will. And I just felt like he can bring the firepower off both wings, but now he's actually controlling it a little bit better. He has a little bit more margin on that forehand than he used to, I'd say, a year ago. I think that's been the main difference, and he still always goes after it and trusts it in big moments. And I think eventually that type of brand of tennis is going to pay off, especially on these fast hard courts where you need that extra bite that I think he gets on that shot. So that's good.
Yeah, totally agreed, Vansh. Has halved his ranking from the start of the year, from 95 to number 46. Look out for him. Definitely could be dangerous. In fact, was it the US Open last year where he had plenty of chances against FAA, or was that Australia? One or the other.
Right, it was the first round of Australia this year.
It was Australia.
2-1, and he had his chances, but I think he's going to start converting more of those to wins, and it's one of those where you feel like the level is there, but it's just gotta get those few big wins. And I think this was his first top 5 win. This was his best win by ranking, actually, in 17 months. Because I remember he did beat Zverev in Miami last year, quite handily, actually, after losing the first set. So this was quite a step in the right direction for Emil.
Yeah, look out for him if you're not aware of him. Vansh is quite right. He's taking steps in the right direction, and it's probably just a bit of mentality that will get him over the line against a bigger opponent on a bigger stage. So pay attention, definitely. And moving on to the finalists, if we can, Yoshihito Nishioka is the first guy I'd like to talk about. He had an outstanding run this week, defeated in the first 2 rounds de Minaur and Brooksby back-to-back, so they were obviously the Atlanta finalists from last week. Seriously impressive against de Minaur, had saved match points along the way. Lopsided head-to-head actually extends to 3-0 for Nishioka, which I was pretty surprised by, but maybe it's the sort of game style that's just so similar. De Minaur finds it quite difficult. Nishioka's so quick from the back of the court. I'm really not sure, but anyway, something about Nishioka troubles de Minaur. Then he also beat Kachanov, Dan Evans, and Andrey Rublev. It was some run, absolutely crazy. I'd like to talk about the Nishioka even Rublev match. Fans, did you get to see any of that?
Yeah, I did, and it's I really did not see this run at all coming from Yoshi. He had dropped for a while there, and he was playing challengers earlier this year, and I'm just reminded again watching him just how good his anticipation is and how quick he is around the court, and just how little he was giving away this week, and just lockdown mode on all the big points. And he was just he's not a big guy obviously, but he moves the ball around so well and so cleverly, especially with the way he's he was taking the ball early on the backhand. He was rushing Rublev. He was redirecting absorbing all the pace and going down the line often, and just really even went after Rublev's second serve, which obviously can be a bit of a weakness, and especially on hard court where it sits up nice in the opponent's strike zone, and then Rublev's having to play defense from there, and that's where I felt like Yoshihito did such a good job in that match.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the things I had, able to deal with those high kickers. That's basically the only second serve that Rublev's got, so you can definitely predict it. But he was able to deal with them really, really well, taking them early. One kind of note, I'm going to turn it around a little bit on Rublev, that I did start to make. Rublev's actually pretty good against lefties, so it's not a lefty thing. He's got a pretty decent record. I think it's like 27-7 or something like that. I'm sure there's a few raffle losses in there. It was interesting to see Rublev kind of stick to the same tactics though against Nishioka. It was pretty clear that this wasn't working. Trading backhands cross court to try and exploit some sort of short ball from the forehand. And against Nishioka, I guess, because he must do this against other lefties, against Nishioka, I guess just the rally temperament is so high, it's always going to come back, and you're not going to get that short ball if you don't mix it up, basically. And he just kept doing it. He didn't change it up at all. And the sort of one trick poniness of Rublev is getting a little bit frustrating, and not even as a fan, it's getting frustrating for me, I've got to say. You agree with that, Vansh?
I totally agree with you. Like I've felt this way for a while actually, since at some point last year. Really, I started to feel this way. After his Monte Carlo run even in Cincinnati, I felt that way. Even though he got to the final, I just felt like he just doesn't mix it up enough. And the second serve can be a liability. He doesn't really mix up his pace really that often. He sort of has like a one shot on the forehand, which is it's obviously really deadly when it's clicking, but he doesn't really have that extra gear or the necessarily. It's not even just like the variety. I also feel like he can get a lot better at putting away volleys and just getting a lot better at finishing points at net. And I feel like that's where he sort of stagnates a little bit, because he has the approach shot that he wants, and he has the forehand that does damage, but then he can't finish right on the next shot, where he's getting, he has that really good 1-2 sort of play where he just goes inside out repeatedly on the forehand, and then he sort of finds a shorter ball, and that Yoshihito was just not giving him that. And every time, and Rublev just kept going after it. He never went inside in earlier. He never tried to mix in or maybe throw in a drop shot, which is just not really his forte. He doesn't really have great hands or great touch.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's where that can sort of be exposed. Those, and then it's frustrating to watch himself sort of, beat himself up after a lot of points that don't go his way, and
literally
can be quite depressing to watch.
It can, definitely. I'm glad you sort of agree with me there, because it's been a while. It's been a while since I've kind of seen something from Rublev that I've been like, well, that wasn't there before. His game's kind of stayed pretty similar. Since that Monte Carlo run, I guess, when he made his first Masters final, and that's been about a year and a half. Really, of kind of
I've also noticed he's sort of had a good first 3 months of the year. He tends to do really well in February, and tends to do really well in the early clay court tournaments. Like last year it was Monte Carlo, this year it was Belgrade, where he played a very impressive match against Djokovic and looked really good that week. And obviously he won Marseille, made the semifinals of Indian Wells. So he's had a good year, but it's been very much the same thing from him the last 2 or 3 seasons. And I just like to see a little bit more. And maybe some of that will help him. Some of these things that we're talking about is also one of the reasons why he's not been past the quarterfinals, I guess, in a major. That's sort of the next step for him. Get to a major semi and sort of beat one of those elite top 8 guys. I think that's the next thing missing.
I can't see it happening unless there was some very, very sort of surprising circumstances for those reasons.
For sure.
I gotta agree, Vansh. Moving on, however, Nishioka did get through that semi-final. He made it to the final, and awaiting was Nick Kyrgios. Nick was able to beat him, got the 7th title of his career. Along the way, however, he had to beat 6 players back-to-back because he was unseeded. Giron, Paul, Opelka, Ymer, Nishioka, and then in the quarterfinals, Francis Tiafoe, where he had to save 5 match points along the way in the second set tiebreak. Now, just a little rundown of some of those points very quickly. 1 with an ace, naturally, you'd imagine. That's not that surprising. 1 with a backhand down the line, however. That was fantastic. 1 with a second serve and volley, which was amazing. And 1 off a 127-mile-an-hour serve from Tiafoe that he returned right on the line with his backhand. So impressive. For all the histrionics, etc., stuff like that is so impressive from Kyrgios. And it's hard, I've always sort of wrestled with shouldn't I kind of like him. Then you see stuff like this and you're like, you can't not enjoy the guy's tennis, definitely, at least.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, that Tiafoe Kyrgios match was very entertaining, probably the match of the week. Especially the way that tiebreak that return was ridiculous at 11-10 in the tiebreak to pull off something like that. Tiafoe didn't even hit a bad serve. He hit a spot really well, and Kyrgios not only gets his racket on it, but gets it back really deep and just pushes Francis back on the back foot. And then, it's just, and like you said, the rundown of those 5 match points, and when you saved them, and you just knew whoever won that second. I mean, in Kyrgios's case, I just knew he was going to roll away with the third, just the way the match was going. And he was starting to lose it there for a while. He was going for some big second serves. It was kind of late at night, right? It was almost 12:30. He was starting to lose his focus a
Yeah,
little bit through that tie break, but
yeah,
then he locked back into gear and got it done in the third. And pretty much that's kind of been the story. Like, you still see some of those histrionics here and there, but once the point starts, I feel like he's maintaining a really good level, and he's
mhm,
very sort of he's playing the right way tactically, and he's more
yeah,
committed to his tennis than I've seen in the past. And I guess the results are showing, because he's had a pretty good year. 27 and
yeah,
7, one of the best winning percentages on tour, and he's not really taken any bad losses. So
yeah. Absolutely agree. And I think, moving on to the final, we saw some more like astute tactics. The guys playing
yeah,
smart tennis. One of the biggest things I wanted to mention in this match, such a solid baseliner. Generally, Nishioka's got pretty good stats on second serve, especially for a guy that's obviously on the shorter side. But it's obviously about the rally temperament and being able to have an unattackable serve that gets him such good stats. Generally been over 50% all week, apart from against Dan Evans, but he did cut down his first serve percentage against him, or he had his highest serve percentage against him, sorry, so it didn't really matter too much. Nick was able to cut down the number of first serves and play for Nishioka. Obviously felt like he was under pressure, and the way he was able to do that was by attacking the second serve better than anybody else did all week, and I wouldn't have called him a brilliant returner at the start of the year, so this is definitely something that's got better. It's probably the thing that's got better for me. I feel like we don't see enough players cheat over to the backhand side when you get a weaker second serve. I mean, Nick was basically standing, on the tee at times in the juice court, on the tram lines in the ad court. He was happy to let Nishioka, try and either find the open space in the forehand or try and kick high to the backhand. And because he couldn't answer either of those questions, Kyrgios just kept ripping the forehands, and that's what players should do. Definitely, as good returners, they should be able to be aggressive. And you heard Nick saying it a few times. Be aggressive, sort of off the return when he was kind of being a bit more passive near the tail end of the match. Really interesting for me, I think, Vansh.
yeah,
Definitely.
for sure. I think you said it all. And the backhand return from Kyrgios on the deuce side was money in the whole match, because that's what kept
Yeah,
Nishioka behind the
yeah, it's
baseline and
crazy.
just rushed him. And then he just got the forehand that he wanted, and even some of the forehand returns he was hitting were deep and potent. And Nishioka was having to play defense right off the first shot, and that's
Yeah,
not what you want to be doing if you're Nishioka. And some of those the kick serve to the backhand just doesn't work very well against Kyrgios. You want to go fast, hard to the body, or you want to just jam his forehand and make him get out of
yeah,
the way and hit an uncomfortable return. But it's much harder, obviously,
yeah.
being a stable player than Nishioka is. But I just felt like he was on the back foot for most of the match and just kind of hanging on.
Yeah, so did I. A wee rundown of the stats just before we close shop on Washington. Kyrgios serving stats pretty sick all week, as
Yeah.
you'd imagine. Didn't get
Never
broken
got broken,
once.
right? Didn't get broken
Yeah,
in all the sets he played.
in
Just the six
six
matches.
matches exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
saved all 10 break points he faced. First serve win percentage averaging over 80%. I mean, it's crazy stuff. I mean, obviously after Wimbledon, if there was points, you really should be seeing Kyrgios within the top 15. Shame he won't get a seed for, well, he might get a seed for the US, of course, sorry, but at the moment he's not guaranteed one,
Mhm.
which it was a shame considering the level he's playing, definitely. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, first title for Nick since winning here in 2019. Pretty crazy,
Hmm.
and obviously meant a ton to him when he won, sinking to the ground after he won. First player to win both the singles and doubles at the Washington Open in its 53-year history.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
he won the doubles in Atlanta as well last week as well, right? So that's
yeah, he did. Yeah,
so
that's true.
yeah, that's
He'd be fairly
that's
well
quite a run
ranked.
of
I've not
form.
looked at his live ranking, but I imagine it's pretty decent. Uh,
Yeah.
Move on to the WTA side of Washington, Vance, if you're ready.
Yep.
Yeah, I would like to talk about Samsonova in particular in this rundown. And the one match I'd like to touch on before we touch on the final is her match against Raducanu. Emma was decent actually. I don't know if you got to see it, Vance. Did you see any of this match?
Yeah, I saw quite a lot of Emma versus Camila Osorio, and then I watched a lot of the first set in this match.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Well, the first set was the one to watch, Vance. Definitely.
for sure, yeah, it was 7-6, 6-1.
Yeah.
For that
It,
was the one where Emma had to win that set in order to really establish herself. But yeah, it
yeah.
was very impressive from Samsonova. Such a
It
big
was.
hitter.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm honestly, I'm enamored by it. The forehand is insanely good. I wanted to talk about basically how Emma kind of dealt with the match and how she's been dealing with the WTA in general, the tour in general. One area I felt like she should have been able to be aggressive almost the return, and really that's her forte. That's how she won the US Open for me. That's, you know, she was amazingly aggressive on return all fortnight there, and just able to tee off on people's serves. And Samsonova, although she does have she has a very good first serve, second serve is full of kick, but it's certainly probably the only area where Raducanu could have been consistently aggressive. The way that Samsonova was hitting the ball from the back of the court, she barely gave her chances. At the same time, she did stave off enough of her shots to earn herself 4 set points throughout that set. So, you know, she's doing something right, and she was able to attack serves when she could, basically. So I felt like she actually played a pretty decent match, and she should get a few, you know, she should get wins against other players playing like that. Definitely. Samsonova really always surprises me that Samsonova is as low ranked as she is, but then you do see her play some pretty crazy matches every now and then. So nonetheless, Raducanu came up against her when she was playing amazingly well, so I wouldn't feel so bad about that loss if you are a Raducanu fan. I would honestly say, generally, Emma does struggle against big hitters. If you look at a few of our last losses, so Sasnovich, Andreescu, Swiatek, Rybakina, obviously Swiatek's completely different, but the other ones do have particularly big weapons. I would say, honestly, I've yet to see Raducanu beat a big hitter on tour. Zachary, I wouldn't count from last year because she didn't play her usual brand of tennis. I can't think of anything. Looking all her wins, I wouldn't say there's one that sticks out as somebody who hits the ball pretty big. So there is a chance that she's prone to being overpowered from the baseline. Vansh, I don't know if you feel the same way, but yeah,
I did sort of feel like watching the Garcia match at Wimbledon. I did sort of feel like there was a big power discrepancy there between Caroline and her ground strokes, especially not only in speed but also in sheer pace and depth. And I just felt like Emma was on her back foot the whole time in a way that she wasn't at all in the U.S. Open. Obviously, the quick courts really helped her, and she was able to really just. I felt like she was hitting her forehand with a lot more conviction and getting a lot more bite, and it was really skidding through those low courts. But if she doesn't get that skidding effect, it's a lot harder for her to really generate pace and sort of absorb blows from her opponents. Like really, the only match I can think of. I mean, I don't even think Bencic I would classify her as a really big hitter. She's more just a really good redirector, and she's really good at just walking into her shots with the way she hits. But yeah, I kind of agree with you. She still had 4 set points, and she was up 6-4 in the first set tiebreak, and then lost those 4 points in a row. And you're right. I think she could have done a little bit more of Samsonova's second serve and been a little bit more assertive there, and sort of stayed with her a bit longer in the baseline rallies. But I feel like something is also missing a little bit. I don't know if it's something physical in her game, where I just feel like she's just lacking that little bit of extra physicality that you need right now.
Yeah,
maybe that'll just come with more matches on the tour. More, I mean, defending your U.S. Open title, I think is totally out of realm. If she managed to do that again, I think that's bigger than winning the title last year. So
absolutely.
So this is just kind of her learning year on the tour, because she skipped like 30 steps along the way.
Yeah.
So it's very sort of unconventional, I think.
You're quite right. Moving on from Raducanu though, I'll move on to the final where Samsonova played Kanepi. I've got a very quick analysis of this, Vanch. I don't know if you actually watched the match, but I suppose I'm interested to hear your thoughts first before I say anything.
Yeah, I was. To be honest, it kind of came down to one game in the third set at 3-4, where it just like Kanepi played a kind of a pretty sloppy game and tired looking game, and I think she'd taken had she taken an injury timeout before that, or is that
she did? She did.
She did, yeah. So I think physically she was feeling it quite a bit, and Samsonova really managed to capitalize. And I just didn't feel like there were that many rallies in this match. It was very sort of because they're both such big hitters and they both play such great first strike tennis. There wasn't much defense going on. It was very much like on the server's racket the whole time, and very few breaks of serve, I guess. Maybe mostly in the first set, really, and it was very straightforward.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've said exactly the same thing, Vansh, but I was a bit more negative about it. I don't know if I find much pleasure in watching two big hitters square off on TV. I just feel like the lack of rallies, and I mean some of the points end up looking very cheap because to force an error from either side is really easy, relative to other players, I would say. So yeah, you gotta, if you're gonna have a big hitter, I think square them off against somebody with defense like Gauff or something like that, or in fact, we'll move on to that at the end of the pod. I've got one segment about Gauff and Osaka, which I really like that match. But yeah, for me, this final was a little bit lacking. But
yeah, I agree.
It was still good to see Samsonova win the title. I'm a big fan of hers, and to see her put it together for so many matches. Brilliant. Second final for Samsonova, second title won. Came back from a set down in both matches as well. So good on her. I thought it was a really impressive run.
What was Samsonova's other title? It was Berlin, right? Last year.
Berlin last year, yeah.
That was what I watched. It was very impressive.
Maybe?
Yeah, Bencic in the final, right?
Yeah, love her forehand so much. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's amazing. It's the best. It literally could be top 3 forehands on the tour for me. It's incredible. Happy to move on to Los Cabos, Vansh?
Yes, some Daniil Medvedev action.
Yes, return of Medvedev. Has been a wee while. Loads of little Medvedevisms all week that I felt like I hadn't seen in ages for some reason. Just like he'd been away for that long, I forgot that he returned from like 7 meters behind the baseline. Like the first point he played, don't know. I guess I hadn't seen anybody else do it for so long. It was just weird. Loved it though. Lovely to see him back, and obviously good for him to get a title. The biggest thing for me obviously was the fact that he broke his match losing streak, and he did talk about how nervous he was. So for me, if he's winning a title and he's getting a little bit of confidence back in a final, it could only mean good things for bigger matches at places like the US Open. So it's all positives for me. Definitely, I want to see Medvedev do well at the US Open again for sure. I would like to talk about Cam Norrie though first, if that's okay. Cam Norrie making his 10th ATP final in the last 18 months and beating Auger-Aliassime. Insane stat for me since the start of 2021. That is on par with Novak, Ruud and Medvedev has one more at 11. So, I mean, esteemed company for people who are still slating him. The guy is I mean, he's doing really well. He's in a league with the biggest and best players in the world. 5th top 10 victory as well for him this week, which is quite important for him to keep notching those big wins. Has beaten Isner in the past, Thiem, Rublev and Tsitsipas, all the last 3 even, all within the last couple of years. So to add one more on Auger-Aliassime, who he had a very bad record against beforehand, I think love 5. Amazing. Obviously he should really have one more win against Auger-Aliassime, but I don't know if you saw that match last year in Paris, but he got pretty unlucky not to convert one of 3 match points. I think it's 6-3 in the tiebreak.
Right.
But
it was the Vienna match, right?
Vienna, yeah. I knew it was indoors at the end of the year, but I couldn't remember where.
Yeah, that was the one when commentators kept saying in that match, he's against an opponent he's really struggled again. I thought, okay, but there was that Vienna match where if he just wins that, that head to head looks a little different, and
exactly.
I guess it kind of showed in this one too. Such an awkward player to play against, and such an awesome. I actually really, his backhand looks very unconventional, but I think it's one of the best backhands on tour just because of how effective it is. Like you literally have to be inside the court when you're trying to defend against it because it stays that low and it's that short inside. Like it really skids, and then the contrast with his forehand. My gosh,
and it's so tough to deal with. I agree, Vansh. Like it's really impressive. One of the ways he used that in particular, actually, I was really impressed with, and I mean he does it against loads of players, but to use it against FAA in particular is very smart because I still think you could put his backhand under pressure if you play the right shot to it. It's still a good shot, obviously, but Cam's ability to approach the net of his own backhand to FAA's backhand was a repeatable and reliable tactic. I don't think FAA won a single point, to be honest. Like I couldn't remember one where he was able to turn that around from that position. So it's a really, really smart play. I believe the crucial break in the last set was a backhand slice approach to Felix's backhand.
Felix's backhand, yes, that was the play.
Yeah, so so impressive. The only place that obviously probably needs tightening up, well, in the future as well against other big players will probably still be his forehand. When he really does need to go for forehand aggression over and over again, it can look a little loose. And you did see it ever so often, even in this matchup. However, I was still really impressed with it. Overall, I still think Cam's biggest improvement statistically over the last year and a half has been his ability to capitalise on his +1 shot. His serve in particular, sometimes his return as well as return +1, but his serve +1 in particular, and being able to be aggressive with that's where he's done the work, and it paid off in matches like this. You need that sort of ability to win cheap points if you're going to beat top 10 players for sure. So really impressed with it, and he did manage to do it quite a lot against FAE here.
Yeah, I do agree, especially the way he mixes up his serve now. And then obviously he has that wide serve on the ad side that he used really effectively to FAE's backhand, and then he can sort of get the short ball that he wants. But then he can also go down the line every so often, go down the tee. He can sort of get his forehand in play where he doesn't have to hit a super attacking shot, but as long as it's safe and it has some margin, then he can start doing his patterns with the backhand and go short cross and then go down the line. And I just feel like he's so astute about when to go across, when to go down the line, when to play safe, when to pull the trigger. He's become really good at sort of evaluating the situations much better. Even when he did get tight in the last game, and he saved those 2 break points, he would have. You just felt like he was always going to be there, and just so annoying for FAA to get the ball past him.
He did actually. He mentioned in the post-match interview or on court that he did have the Vienna match in his head in that last game.
Yeah.
So I know. So nerves do actually play a part when you've had sort of close matches like that in the past for big players. So it wasn't coincidence, Vansh.
Felix's unforced errors in tight moments, is that something that concerns you right now, or is that just, you think, part of the growing pains process and just something you think it's something kind of holding him back in some of these bigger matches that he should win?
I feel like sometimes he comes into matches and he'll do that over and over again. I think the biggest thing for me though is that he has had matches like that this year. We just talked about Rusevori, where he is able to come out the other end of a match like that and still win on a bigger stage, basically. So for me, the fact that he's a 5-set contender is the sort of biggest takeaway for me. If he's losing matches like this, I think he'll live, especially making a semi-final is a good week for anybody anyway. But the fact that he doesn't tend to perform like that so much in slams anymore, and when he does, he can still find a way to win. It's not the biggest issue for me, Vanch, I would say. Maybe there'll be the odd time over 3 sets, maybe where he plays a really big opponent in like a Masters final or something. Obviously, we're still waiting for him to make that breakthrough at Masters level, so maybe it'll be an issue then. But for me, the fact that I think that's the biggest consolation. It's a massive consolation. The fact that he's still able to come through matches like that in slams, definitely.
I agree. I think the best of 5 really helps him in that way, and he can just sort of shrug it off, and he can play another really good set, and he can weather the storm. I think he's shown that a lot, especially since last year's Wimbledon, for 4 slams in a row. So that's I think that's big. I agree with you.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to the Cam Medvedev final, there was a few things we were saying there that will tie into this matchup analysis, basically. First thing, I guess, I was just talking about Cam's biggest improvement this year being the serve +1 and being able to finish points off a lot quicker than he would normally. Unfortunately, this matchup isn't particularly good for Cam because although he has that amazing lefty serve, it doesn't really have much of an effect against somebody who's standing sort of 7 meters behind the baseline, especially somebody who's going to get it deep pretty much every time. So many of Cam's service points go into sort of neutral baseline rallies. Even if he's winning about 50% of those rallies, he's going to lose about 50% of his service games, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, we saw Cam come out with the underarm serve at one point. If you see Cam Norrie coming out with an underarm serve, then you know that his opponent's probably living in his head rent-free, to be honest. So, for all the advantages that Cam has, there was one advantage for me that Cam had over Medvedev. Very small, though, and really not relative to the outcome of the match. But there was the occasional time where Cam's backhand was a little bit of a nightmare for Medvedev to deal with. He doesn't like to dig it out like that so much, especially on the slice. It's not the shot that Cam was using, but it's a similar sort of outcome basically when it's skidding off the court like that, and it's pretty tough for Medvedev to just keep hitting it cross court. It's not what he'd do against Cam Norrie. However, that is a small advantage compared to just the big sort of serving advantage Medvedev had, and then the returning advantage. For me, it's what he does against most people, but Cam Norrie in particular, his weapons just weren't working against him.
No, I feel the same way against most players that Medvedev plays on hard court this time of the year. I just feel like the two biggest shots in the game, the serve and the return, he just has such a big advantage. It's a combination of both. It's the way he sort of returns 6-7 feet behind the baseline, and then his sort of octopus defense to sort of cover the next shot, whether it be a +1 drop shot or it be like a serve and volley attempt, or whether it just be just the way he moves and he sort of sets up his next ground strokes, and he can do it both laterally and also longitudinally and coming forward, and it's just you feel like it's such a nightmare when he's on the stretch and he's trying to just he's sliding and he's trying to get the ball past you, and you're Cameron Norrie and you have to just wait for the ball to just pass you by while you're at the net trying to finish the point. And it's just, and we saw a little bit of that once Medvedev actually played a really scratchy game, like 5-4 40-15 up on his serve, and that's where Cam sort of got the foothold back, and it was 5-all, and then he didn't win another game after that, and you just felt like if he doesn't hold here to at least make Medvedev serve to force a tiebreak, it's going to be really, really slim pickings the rest of the match, especially when Medvedev sneaks out a set like that. Then he's such a good front runner from there.
Yeah, he loosens up. He always loosens up in that sort of position. He doesn't miss up. He doesn't really give away anything when he's sort of in that position. Definitely, makes the biggest difference. For me, Vansh, amazing to see Med warming back into the American hardcourt season. Of course, it's always historically been his favourite time of the year. Serve went a little haywire on grass for a little while, to be honest. So maybe the pressure of needing to finish points off a little bit quicker on that surface maybe made a difference. But to see him back in his element, so impressive, and I already fancy his chances to defend his title in the US. Obviously, it's early days, but playing like that, he'll beat 95% of the tour. So
yeah, for sure. I'm still trying to gauge whether he's the co-favorite or he's sort of just right behind Rafa. Although we still have to see Rafa play, but he's sort of definitely 1 or 2 for me. Like he's kind of maybe the guy to beat on hard courts generally, especially from August to February. So
only the 5th bagel of Cam Norrie's career, by the way, just as a note, which is very impressive. The last one we've got is San Jose on the WTA side. I will talk about Kasatkina and Rogers in just a second, but the one match that in particular stood out for me was Coco Gauff v Naomi Osaka in the round of 16. In fact, very, very early on. Did you catch any of that, Vanch?
I did.
What do you think?
It was, I thought it was probably the headline match for the tournament, and it was awesome to see, first of all, Naomi back. Still don't understand how she can take whatever 4 months off and serve and hit the way she did, especially in her first match. Mm-hmm. And I always thought, Coco was going to be a little bit of a step up, maybe a little too soon for Osaka. But on the other hand, Coco played such a good match, especially to go up 6-4, 5-1. Just, hitting her forehand much better than I've seen her since the clay season.
Yeah.
Just, defending and moving so well. And Osaka's pace was just not bothering her. She was serving well. She was really, dictating at times, especially with her backhand, going down the line off and trading with Naomi, which is not easy to do on a hard court.
Yeah.
And absorbing all those blows and just hitting it right back at her and making Naomi uncomfortable just by getting so many balls back in tough positions.
Definitely. I mean, the defence in particular was so impressive. The movement of Gauff, incredible. Interesting for me, Naomi coming back. The last time she came back from an extended layoff was at the start of the year, and I do remember back then as well, the backhand was a little rusty. I think that's the shot that tends to leak errors if she's been away for a while. She doesn't tend to clear the net with a ton of net clearance, and against somebody who's going to make you play a lot more backhands than usual, that's why we start to see sort of leak errors, and why you start to see a few more unforced from that side than you normally would from her. But yeah, I mean, a lot of that has got to go down to Gauff as well. Definitely, it was very, very impressive. The return normally is where Osaka can shine. For me, matchup wise against Gauff, it's not so easy to do. Obviously, the first serve of Gauff saved her multiple times. I think you were particularly impressed by that, Vance. I remember you saying that. But yeah. I totally agree. The wide serve in particular is so good. Even the odd body serve just to keep Osaka on her toes. Never felt comfortable in return. Dropped just 5 points in first serve. Incredibly impressive.
Incredible, yeah. And in the first set, she was 13 out of 14. So it was just pretty much untouchable.
Yeah. One little side note, I don't know if you noticed this, but if you were watching the speedometer, I mean, you might not have even noticed this, but there's absolutely no way the speed gun was working. I mean,
I was very doubtful about it too. Like I was like, there's no way that's right.
There was like times that she was like slamming down unreturnable body serves, and it would pop up with like 81 miles an hour, and I mean, there's no way.
Like, no way, that's 81. No way.
Yeah. 100%. There's no way that's right. So I don't know what was going on. So it's just an interesting point as well, because I remember the fastest serve of all time kind of shut down because the speed gun in was it an Indian tournament, I think, or
I actually don't remember.
I think it was. I believe I've not got the exact stat, but Sam Groff slammed down a serve at like 163 miles an hour. Yeah, something along those lines. I thought it was Pune.
I don't know what it is for the women's. Is it Venus at 131, or is it?
Yeah, that sounds right. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that rings a big bell. I think that is right, but that's official, and I think the official men's one is like Isner 150 or something like that, or maybe Karlovic, one or the other. But yeah, anyway, don't always believe the service speeds you see. They're not always correct. Was my point anyway. Yeah, so important to stave off the comeback from Osaka, and very very clear character development of Gauff in that that could have been the kind of position she could have squandered in the end, and it was her serve that saved her, when in the past it has been her serve that's maybe failed her a few times. There was a few double faults, yes, but to deliver big first serves in really important moments against a really good returner, very impressive. I mean, I think she had to convert on her 8th match point, Vanch, I believe. So
they only saved 7. I know it could have easily gone the other direction. So it was good maturity on her part too. I think that's the word that comes to mind with Gauff always, is her maturity. So I feel like she's an 18-year-old veteran out there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. One of the other points I'd like to make, actually, just extending on that, Vance, I totally agree with that, is the variety that Gauff can create from a racket is very veteran-like, I would say. It's very, very impressive. Like, some of the stuff she was coming out against Osaka with, just to stop her from teeing off on shots wherever possible. Fear of drop shots, stopping Naomi from ever sort of getting super aggressive, basically. Finesse in general. I mean, there was a few slices, a forehand slice in particular, just forced the error to get the first break, for example. Extremely tight defensive angled forehand at 3-2. Just stuff like that. I love it, Vance. It's one of the reasons that Gauff's such a good player.
And then also the way she sort of changes grips on her forehand drop shot, and she'll just go to the continental grip on it, and then she'll move forward and she'll cut it off. She's so good at doing that.
Yeah, she's a brilliant volleyer as well. Obviously, such an astute doubles player, so it's not very surprising. Yeah. So yeah, it's very impressive.
I just hope her second serve continues to move in the right direction, and they keep working on the forehand, because the second serve did unfortunately collapse a bit, especially in their next match against Badosa. Those 2 double faults in a row in the tiebreak in the first set, and then forehand kind of went away in the 2 games she got broken in the second set as well. So, but nothing. But still nothing to worry about. She's on a good trajectory at the moment.
Yeah. The last thing I'd like to talk about is Daria Kasatkina's run to the title. Not really much to see her, to be honest. Just the final, I suppose, and just a mention of her opponents. The fact she beat Rybakina, Sabalenka, and Rogers from a set down this week. I mean, that's 3 times. Incredibly impressive. Despite hitting like 13 double faults in the match versus Sabalenka, but obviously Sabalenka must have hit about 20 herself, so it's not mega surprising. Yeah. But yeah, very, very impressive run from Kasatkina, and seriously makes me want to to look out for the next few weeks, because she could really be dangerous. She could break down a lot of people's games playing like that. Her slice in particular, incredibly impressive. I could see her slice working against players, with aggressive but ropey weapons, players like Rybakina and Sabalenka that she beat this week, but also favourites for the US Open, Jabeur, Sakkari, players like that. I think Swiatek's about the only one that could consistently step up and probably beat her every time, because she's not got an aggressive weapon that tends to break down, and the slice certainly doesn't work against her. However, yeah, it's super, and obviously the forehand as well.
I love the variety on her forehand, because there's times where she'll loop it and play extremely high balls with a lot of margin, and then push the opponent back, and then she'll get the forehand that she wants, and she'll go inside and almost immediately, and it's like and she'll go back behind you as well. And she did that a lot against Badosa, and especially in the final at times against Shelby. You're right about the slice. I love it. I think it's one of the best shots on tour, and she's got a pretty good complete game now in general, and it's really grown the last year or so. She's number 3 in the race, so if she keeps this up, I think she's definitely going to qualify for the World Tour finals, and she is going to be a contender for more 1000s and maybe another deep run in a major in the US Open as well. So
definitely. Well, so that number 3 in the race is made up of French Open semi-final, Rome Masters semi-final, beaten both times by Swiatek, I believe. In fact, that's more than enough to make top 10 nowadays. It makes sense. So number 9 in the world at the moment. It's very, very, very impressive.
For sure. Just like Ruusuvuori, I said, was similar to Sinner. I think in some ways she's sort of maybe a Swiatek 0.75 or 0.8, kind of the way that she constructs points. It's
I've said that as well in the past.
There's a reliability about her and her ground strokes that just makes me think.
And and her lack of service-led points as well. I don't think that's too harsh to say, but yeah. And so obviously Swiatek earns more points off her serve, but there's a lot of similarities. I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, but impressive for her to win her 4th 500, because I think 4 out of her 5 titles are 500s, and there's not that many more players on tour who has more than her. She's like the 7th most active in terms of 500s won, which is pretty good. 500s are hard to win these days on the WTA. If you saw this draw in San Jose, it's like pretty much 5 of the top 10 were there, and 11 of the top 25. Like it was stacked.
Oh, yeah, they're always stacked. You're quite right. It's a seriously impressive stat. I agree, Vanch. Little just quote from Shelby Rogers to finish. I thought it was very sweet.
Oh, yeah.
It was a very, very nice post-match interview. But she said in particular, quoted Tony Finau. Is that right? Tony Finau, the golfer? I believe that. She said, a winner is just a loser that doesn't quit, and it rang true with me. It was really nice, and I think she's a very positive person. 3 finals, I believe, and she's lost all 3, and obviously wants to make that next step, and it just kind of shows you that she's willing to keep grinding, and obviously it's all full of plaudits for the other player every time she loses as well. So it's one of those players that you'd like to see do well.
For sure. Very wholesome player, and probably the best player now to have not won a title in the WTA. 2 quarterfinals and 3 finals, I think, in the top 30 for the first time. So great to see her do well. And obviously still very dangerous for anyone in early rounds of these tournaments.
Oh yeah, of course. Look to last year, and Barty losing from 5 double breakup in the US Open, and Kasatkina as well. The quote for me in the post match and the whatever you call it, the winner's speech, I guess. I want to wish everyone a lot of love, happiness, and peace in this world. And she said it very, very heartfeltly. It was a tender moment.
I have a lot of respect for her for coming out in public. Especially in Russia, it's really difficult to do. So
of course,
hopefully it'll inspire other women, and no matter where they're from, to do the same.
Definitely, and I mean, in the midst of everything that's going on in Russia at the moment as well, it's doubly impressive. Yeah. All round, she's incredibly likable. So you're quite right, Vanch. I also really hope, and I do stand by this. I seriously think she could make a deep run at the US Open, unless she gets pipped in a round of 16 with Swiatek or something like that. I could see her beating quite a lot of the top players at the moment, playing a tricky game like that, definitely. So I hope she does well. Right, Vanch, I think we can stop there.
Yep.
Thanks very much for joining me as always, audience. Thank you for listening this far through. We will be covering everything Montreal, everything Toronto, everything Cincinnati, etc. over the course of the North American hardcourt spin, so please join us. If you want to catch any of Vansh's work, you can go to @VanshV2K on Twitter. Is that right, Vansh?
You got it.
Yeah. You can go to @ontheline_Jack for my stuff, or you can go to onlinetennis.uk. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.